Welcome to our free course, 10 Ways to Reduce Your Carbon Footprint and How You Can Turn This to Your Commercial Advantage. As you are well aware, commercial competition is fierce and every advantage you can find over your competitors is vital. In this short course, our 10 ways of reducing your carbon footprint will help you make the most of that advantage. Whether because of regulations and laws or through simple grants and incentives, reducing your carbon footprint is necessary and makes sound business sense. You'd want to be ahead of your competitors in any way that brings positive results. Reducing your carbon footprint is no different, and with legislation across the world is unavoidable. Here's a snapshot of 10 ways that will help you to reduce your carbon footprint. It looks at different methods, sources of information and advice from various professional and government-approved organizations. Let's take a closer look at these 10 methods one by one. Number 1. Look at the load factor for each trip and the distance traveled. Can the vehicle be packed more efficiently to get more in, without overloading, of course? Perhaps loading by hand without pallets might squeeze more cargo in, but a balance between load and efficiency of handling will need to be considered. Could reconfiguring the loading of the pallets allow more pallets to be fitted into the space available? Would roll cages be more efficient, bearing in mind that the wheels may take up space and that the cages may not always be filled to capacity? Could you rethink the trailer design itself? Consider longer, wider, higher trailers that can fit more in. Consider side-loading trailers to make loading more efficient. Talk to the carriers, logistics service providers, loaders and unloaders, and anyone else that might be affected by your decisions. Number 2. Look at introducing alternative fuel-powered vehicles that have lower emissions of CO2 equivalent gases. The technology is still relatively new and trials are taking place around the UK, Europe and elsewhere. Remember that fueling infrastructure is still limited at present when considering alternative fuel technologies. Here are 3 types of fuel to look at. Dual fuel vehicles, which run on a combination of diesel and either CNG, compressed natural gas, or LNG, liquefied natural gas. UCO trucks, which run on used cooking oil. And then there are the so-called hybrids, which use a combination of diesel and electric power. The reduction in CO2 equivalent emissions from these alternative vehicles can be less than some might think, but to compensate, these fuels release far fewer particulates and other pollutants than diesel. The right choice will very much depend upon the operational characteristics of your logistics chain. This includes factors such as the distance between fueling stations, the fact that CNG-fueled vehicles have a shorter range than LNG-fueled vehicles. The availability of the fuels is also clearly important, as is the cost of the vehicles themselves. Being relatively new and not yet mass-produced, they are likely to be more expensive than their diesel equivalents. There is also much hope that the hydrogen fuel cell will prove to be an efficient way to power trucks. This technology shows great promise for zero CO2 equivalent emissions transport. Number 3. Now we'll take electric-powered vehicles separately, as they have considerable potential for low CO2 equivalent emissions. They're best perhaps for the so-called last mile, urban distribution leg. Again, the technology is relatively new, and the batteries themselves can even represent 50% of the cost of the truck. This makes these vehicles at least twice as expensive as a conventional diesel truck. So, even though the initial cost of the vehicle may be more, some manufacturers will lease the battery, which reduces this initial cost. However, it's essential to look at the whole life cost of the vehicle, including fuel costs, congestion charges, and operational characteristics such as battery recharging opportunities overnight or en route, as this can make electric vehicles actually more cost-effective than a diesel equivalent. For recharging the battery, the availability of charging points has to be considered along with the speed of charging. This can take anywhere between 20 minutes for a rapid charge to 8 hours for a slow charge, depending upon the capacity of the charging points available. The range of the batteries is also a key consideration. Typically, the range is about 120 kilometers, but this can vary depending upon the load being carried, the weather conditions and air temperature, the topography of the area of operation, the amount of stopping and starting involved, and the driver's manner of driving. There are options to combine with diesel engines so that the range can be increased considerably, but this will of course raise the CO2 equivalent emissions. Also, because of the physical size of the batteries, the loading capacity of electric trucks is reduced compared with an equivalent diesel truck. To gain most advantage from electric trucks and make them economically viable, it may be that a complete re-engineering of the logistics chain is required. This might include altering patterns of delivery, particularly where local authority interventions are in place that restrict use of diesel vehicles, say, for example in city centres. Once more, some expert advice is recommended here, but for urban logistics in particular, the benefits of zero emissions and cheaper fuel bills make this option worth considering. Number 4. Consolidation of loads, perhaps with other parts of your business, is another area to explore. Internally, many business units within the same company might be working in isolation from each other, procuring their own freight services, but on very similar routes to each other. By working together and combining respective requirements, it might be possible to share the transport. Of course, some goods cannot be combined because of contamination and other hazards. Externally, you might find other companies, businesses, or enterprises who are not your competitors and who have similar transport requirements to your own. Consolidating deliveries with them could even be an option. After just these 4 points, you can already tell that to reduce your carbon footprint, you'll need to be able to calculate it. Our online course, 5 Steps to Calculating Your Carbon Footprint, verified by the UK's Energy Saving Trust, shows you how to do this. Now take a look at our further 6 tips that will help you save fuel and reduce your carbon footprint. Number 5. Even collaboration with competitors might be trialled. Such collaboration could offer the potential of reducing empty running and improving vehicle load factors. This is a more complicated option to establish and operate. There are many legal and commercial complications that might stand in the way of such collaboration. Such an initiative would need a third party, for example, to have access to data and information on the products being moved, the quantities being moved, and maybe even pricing information. Some of this information, though vital for scheduling the right transport at the right time, if in the hands of a competitor, might be commercially damaging, but there are independent parties around and organisations such as ELUPEG. This is the European Logistics Users, Providers and Enablers Group, which encourages and facilitates collaboration between users, providers and enablers of logistics service. Their website address is shown here. The results of successful collaborations in logistics that exist have proven to be significant in terms of efficiency gains, emissions reductions, and cost savings. Number 6. Can your supply chain be reconfigured? For example, by altering the sourcing of materials and goods, changing production locations, and re-engineering the supply chain. There might be ways to reduce distance and tonnage, and so deliver a reduced carbon footprint. Again, this is going to require some very close collaboration with colleagues and supply chain partners, and may have some serious repercussions for the company and its personnel. Nevertheless, having new and closer sources of materials may be a good risk management strategy, reducing the impact on the business from possible blockages in existing and often distant supply lines. Such things do happen: plant closures, port strikes, security threats and security incidents, extreme climatic conditions, economic and social crises, etc. Sourcing closer can provide a more secure alternative supply as well as lower emissions. Furthermore, for some businesses, the option of 3D printing could bring the manufacturing of products much closer to you and your markets. This would significantly reduce the amount of transport needed and the distances travelled. Number 7. Take a good look at your current schedule for pickups and deliveries. What often happens is that the timings of deliveries and pickups from businesses and shops, etc., are based on little more than the premise, "This is how we've always done it." The reasons for scheduling it this way may once have been sound, but times change and those reasons may no longer be valid. Research has indicated that fuel consumption can more than double when operating on congested roads. The energy used to stop and start a truck getting up to a speed of 56 miles per hour, that is, a typical motorway cruising speed for an HGV, is some 12.5 megajoules. That's enough to light an average home for 24 hours, and represents a lot of wasted fuel and resultant emissions. You can quickly see that by looking at alternative times of the day and week to schedule pickup and delivery of the goods can have a significant impact on the amount of fuel used by the vehicles. This will in turn reduce the emission levels. Avoiding peak traffic congestion periods will give you immediate fuel savings and cut emissions, although there may be time restrictions on deliveries in urban areas. Number 8. How well do the drivers actually drive? If you can track the road freight services and you have any input here with the service provider, or if you operate the trucks, take a look at the driving styles of the drivers. Are they harsh on the brakes and accelerator? This is a major cause of increased fuel usage. Do they leave the engine idling for too long? It may be because your company or your customer leaves the drivers hanging around too long and they keep the engines on to keep warm. If so, consider speeding up the delivery and pickup operations, or look at providing warm places where the drivers can wait in comfort. Research into driving style and how this relates to fuel consumption and emissions has found that acceleration, braking, speed change, late gear changing, and high engine speed have the effect of increasing fuel use and emissions. Reports indicate that fuel savings can be made of 5 to 10% once drivers have been made aware of inefficient driving styles and habits. Driver training and even reward schemes can go a long way to improving driving habits and reducing fuel consumption and emissions. Introducing an element of fuel efficiency reporting and driver competition helps keep that training in the drivers' minds and prevents them from falling back into bad habits. Number 9. The design of trailers is an area to be explored. The lighter the overall structure of the trailer, the less energy it takes to move it. Of course, it still needs to be strong enough to carry the loads required and do the job expected of it over a reasonable time. There are new designs entering the market which claim the same or even better strength and yet which are lighter. This is an area you could explore further with your contracted haulage suppliers or trailer manufacturers as a means of reducing fuel consumption and emissions from your operations. Furthermore, you might be able to consider use of more aerodynamic trailers and cabs. The so-called teardrop trailers, which reduce friction over the trailer, are effective in reducing drag and fuel consumption. You'll find these more in the UK, where vehicle height restrictions are more generous than in many other European countries. In addition, moulded roof fairings and aerodynamic cab collars will reduce fuel consumption at higher speeds, giving suggested fuel savings of up to 4%. Side wings will prevent some of the airflow underneath the trailer, and so again help to reduce drag. And boat tail fins at the rear of the trailer will also reduce drag. One downside to improving vehicle and trailer design to be more aerodynamic is that it can increase the length of vehicles, and on which there are strict legal limits. But there are moves to allow longer vehicles, still within tight limits, when the extra length is caused by improved aerodynamic design and features. Number 10. Tyres and axle alignment also play a part in affecting fuel consumption and therefore emissions. Wrongly inflated tyres will increase friction and require more energy to move the truck. Some tyres can have special pressure monitors fitted into them so that the driver can see when they require inflating or deflating to achieve the optimum tyre pressure. According to the tyre manufacturer Continental, 3 psi underinflation leads to a 5% increase in fuel consumption, and 6 psi underinflation equals 10 to 20% increase. Not to mention the increased wear and tear on the tyres and the shortening of their usable life. Special low-rolling resistance tyres can sometimes save as much as 5% on fuel consumption compared with properly inflated conventional tyres, but it should also be noted that they might wear more quickly and need replacing sooner. Adjusting the wheel axle alignment also has significant benefits to fuel consumption. If a trailer's rear wheel points towards the curb, This means the front of the trailer is being pushed out towards the middle of the road. This in turn means that the trailer is moving ahead diagonally and acting like a massive sail, capturing the wind and increasing the resistance and energy required to haul it along. A good vehicle maintenance program would rectify all these areas and help reduce CO2e emissions. The next step is to use this knowledge to maximum advantage commercially and to market your company as proactive in this area. Our 5 steps to calculating your carbon footprint, verified by the UK's Energy Saving Trust, is available at the website shown here. You'll learn how to choose which areas of your business operation to monitor, how to decide what measurements to take, and how to do a range of important calculations. And finally, you'll learn where you can find more help and information. Go straight to our course 5 Steps to Calculating Your Carbon Footprint at this website. Get ahead of your competition now.